The door of the diner creaked open with a tired sound, and a cold wind followed the man inside. He was tall but looked worn, like time had carved lines into his face. His jacket was old, faded green, with patches that told a story few cared to notice. Dust clung to his boots as if he had walked miles. Some customers glanced up, then quickly turned back to their plates, pretending not to see him. The man was a veteran. His eyes were heavy, carrying shadows of battles fought long ago. He scanned the room quietly, like a soldier entering unknown ground. The smell of fried bacon and stale coffee mixed with cigarette smoke filled the air. A jukebox in the corner played soft country music, drowned by the low chatter of the people. He walked to the counter and sat down slowly, lowering himself as if even sitting carried weight. The waitress, a young woman chewing gum, didn't greet him. She glanced at his jacket and smirked. Without a word, she grabbed a cloudy glass, filled it half-heartedly with water, and placed it in front of him. The glass was dirty, grease marks on the rim, fingerprints, and even a small crack near the bottom. The veteran looked at the glass for a long moment. His reflection bent in the uneven surface, his eyes meeting themselves in that broken shine. He didn't complain. He didn't frown. He just picked up the glass slowly, as if handling something dangerous, and took a sip. At a booth in the corner, two men in work clothes noticed and chuckled. One whispered, "Look at him," too scared to even speak up. The other laughed louder, shaking his head. "Old man should have stayed home. Ain't got no fight left in him." The waitress smirked again, almost proud of the insult she had delivered without words. She went back to chatting with another customer, ignoring the man completely. But the diner wasn't silent. A boy, maybe 10 years old, sat with his father near the window. His wide eyes watched the veteran carefully. The boy had seen soldiers on TV, men in uniforms who looked strong and proud. But this man looked different. He looked tired, almost broken. Yet, in his silence, there was something else, something heavy, something unspoken that the boy couldn't name. The veteran took another sip, set the glass down, and let his gaze wander across the room. He saw the laughter, the avoidance, the quick looks that turned away. He felt the weight of their judgment but did not show anger. His face remained calm, his hands steady. Only his eyes betrayed him. They carried pain, deep and sharp, but behind that pain was something stronger, an iron will, buried but not gone. Minutes passed. The jukebox switched songs. Plates clattered. Coffee cups refilled. But no one spoke to him. No one asked if he wanted a meal. He sat there like a ghost in plain sight, invisible to all except the boy by the window. Finally, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and placed them on the counter. More than enough for the water he was never charged for. He stood slowly, every movement heavy yet steady. His chair scraped the floor, and for the first time, the diner grew quiet. All eyes followed him, though none dared meet his gaze. He adjusted his jacket, looked down at the dirty glass one last time, and then turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, the cold wind swept through again, carrying his presence out with it. The waitress laughed nervously, breaking the silence. "Weird old man," she muttered, picking up the money. But her voice trembled slightly, as if some part of her knew she had crossed a line. The boy tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, who was that man?" His voice was small, but his eyes were full of questions. The father hesitated, staring at the closing door. He knew, but he didn't answer. Not yet. He simply put a hand on his son's shoulder and whispered, "You'll understand soon." Outside, the veteran walked slowly down the empty street. Streetlights flickered weakly, casting long shadows behind him. He reached a small apartment on the edge of town, its paint peeling, windows cracked. Inside, the air was cold and still. On the table by the wall, a box lay open. Inside were medals, folded flags, and photographs of young men in uniform, smiling, alive, frozen in time. The veteran lowered himself into a chair, staring at the photographs. His hands trembled now, not from weakness, but from memory. He whispered a name, then another, and another, names of brothers lost in battles no one in the diner would ever remember. He picked up one medal, turning it in his hands. The metal caught the dim light, shining faintly. His jaw tightened. The dirty glass flashed in his mind, the laughter, the smirk, the silence. He clenched the metal in his fist, but then let out a long, tired breath. He placed it back in the box gently, like laying a friend to rest. Night deepened. Cars passed outside, their headlights painting brief streaks across his wall. The veteran sat in silence, only the ticking clock filling the room. His eyes were open, alert, as if still standing watch. But behind them burned something stronger than sadness. The diner thought he was weak. They thought he was just another old man, forgotten and useless. But they were wrong. The veteran was quiet, yes. Tired, yes. But weak? Never. He had seen things that would break most men. He had endured storms, fire, and death itself. And tomorrow, when he returned, the town would learn who he truly was. Morning sunlight spilled through the diner's dusty windows, but the air inside felt the same, thick with chatter, cigarette smoke, and the clinking of dishes. The place was alive with voices, yet there was one voice missing, the man from last night. His absence did not erase him. Instead, it sparked whispers. The waitress leaned against the counter, twirling her pen as she spoke loudly enough for customers to hear. "Did you see that old guy last night? Comes in here with that ratty jacket, looking like he crawled out of the past. Didn't even complain when I gave him a dirty glass." She laughed, as if proud of her story. The two men from yesterday, the ones who had laughed at the veteran, joined in. "Yeah, what a joke," one said, sipping his coffee. "Guy didn't even have the guts to ask for a clean glass. Just sat there, staring at it like it was poison. Weak as they come." The other nodded, chuckling. "Bet he was never even in the army. Just wears that jacket for attention." The laughter spread across the diner, feeding itself. Some shook their heads in agreement. Others stayed quiet but didn't defend him. It was easier to laugh at the strange old man than to respect someone they didn't understand. At the window, the same boy from yesterday sat again with his father. He stirred his hot chocolate but didn't drink it. His eyes were down, his face tense. He remembered the veteran's silence, the way his eyes had looked, tired but strong. The boy couldn't forget it. "Dad," he whispered, "why were they laughing at him? He didn't do anything wrong." The father glanced at his son, then at the room full of gossip. He stayed quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. Finally, he leaned closer. "Because sometimes, son, people laugh at what they don't understand. That man, he's not what they think." The boy frowned. "Then who is he?" The father didn't answer. Instead, he looked down into his coffee, as if the answer was too heavy to bring into the air just yet. Across the diner, the waitress kept talking, her voice carrying. "You know what I think? He probably drinks from dirty glasses all the time. Probably lives in some dump. Honestly, it's pathetic. People like him should just stay out of sight." The boy's small hands balled into fists under the table. He wanted to shout at her, to tell her she was wrong, but the words stuck in his throat. He was just a kid. Who would listen? The gossip grew louder, spreading beyond the diner walls. By afternoon, the small town buzzed with talk of the strange veteran who sat in silence. Some called him pitiful. Others claimed he was crazy. A few even said he was faking his past. But not everyone mocked. An older man at the gas station shook his head when he overheard the gossip. "Careful what you say. If it's the man I think it is, you owe him more than you know." In a small grocery store, a woman whispered to another, "I remember him. Years ago, during the flood, wasn't he the one who helped rescue people from the river?" The rumors twisted, split, and spread. Some remembered flashes of truth. Others drowned it with lies. The veteran's name never came up, only that old man, the strange soldier, the quiet one. But the story of him drinking from the dirty glass grew like wildfire. Meanwhile, in his small apartment, the veteran sat alone again. The box of medals was still on the table, open like a wound. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling in the air, and stared at the faded photographs of men who were no longer alive. Their smiles haunted him, but also kept him steady. He knew about the gossip. He had seen it in their eyes before they even spoke. The town didn't need words to show him how little they thought of him. But he was not a man who lived for their approval. He carried something deeper, something that no laugh could erase. Still, the memory of the boy's eyes lingered with him. Unlike the others, the boy had looked not with pity, not with mockery, but with questions. That gave him pause. That gave him reason to return. Back at the diner, the boy's father finally spoke. His voice was low, meant only for his son. When I was younger than you, this town faced a storm. Roads washed away, houses flooded. People were trapped. Do you know who went out there when no one else would? The boy's eyes widened. Who? His father leaned closer. That man. The same one they mocked last night. He pulled people out of the water, carried children on his back, even when the current almost took him too. And that wasn't the only time. He served this country. He's a hero. A real one. The boy's chest tightened. He thought back to the veteran's calm silence, the way he drank from the dirty glass without anger. It made sense now. He wasn't weak. He was strong in a way none of the others could understand. Why don't you tell them? The boy asked, glancing at the laughing crowd. His father sighed. Because some truths, they reveal themselves in time. You'll see. The boy stared at the door of the diner, half expecting it to open, half hoping it would. He wanted the man to come back. He wanted the gossip to stop. But most of all, he wanted to hear the man's story from the man himself. As night fell, the gossip didn't fade. It grew sharper, more cruel. The waitress told the story again and again, each time with more exaggeration. Soon the whole town was laughing at the cowardly veteran. But laughter has a short life. What comes after it can be heavy as stone. And the diner, still unaware, was standing at the edge of that weight. Because tomorrow, the veteran would return. And the truth would echo louder than their gossip ever could. Morning came heavy over the small town, clouds hanging low as if the sky itself carried a secret. The diner was full again. Farmers with muddy boots, workers in dusty jackets, old couples sipping their weak coffee, everyone seemed to gather there, not just for food, but for stories. And there was only one story on their lips, the old veteran. The waitress, who now carried her tail like a crown, laughed as she poured coffee. You should have seen him. Sat there like a statue, drinking from that dirty glass as if he didn't even notice. Didn't have the guts to speak up. Pathetic. The two men from before laughed loud enough to turn heads. A man like that? Can't even stand up for himself. And he thinks wearing that jacket makes him special. Another customer added, he's probably just some drifter, playing soldier to get attention. People like him don't belong here. The gossip echoed through the diner, bouncing from table to table until it spilled into the street. By noon, it wasn't just the diner, it was the town. In the grocery store, the barber shop, even in whispers at the church steps, people repeated the same tale. The old veteran had become a joke. But not everyone laughed. The boy sat quietly at the diner window again, staring at his untouched plate of pancakes. His father sat across from him, silent, his eyes dark with thought. The boy finally spoke, his voice low but firm. They don't know. They don't know who he is. The father nodded slowly. No, they don't. And maybe it's time they did. The boy leaned closer. Then tell them, Dad. Tell them what you told me. The father took a deep breath. He looked around the diner at the laughing faces, at the waitress with her cruel smirk, at the men with their careless jokes. Then he set down his coffee and stood. His chair scraped the floor, cutting through the noise. Enough, he said, his voice steady but sharp. The room fell quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. You all sit here mocking a man you don't even know. You call him weak. You call him pitiful. But let me tell you who he is. The waitress rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. Another hero story. But the father didn't flinch. His voice grew stronger. Years ago, when this town was drowning in the flood, when the river tore through homes and families were trapped, who do you think went out there in the dark water? Who tied ropes around his waist and pulled children out with his bare hands? Who carried old folks across the current until his body gave out? The diner was silent now. The laughter had died in their throats. That man, the father continued, pointing toward the door, as if the veteran were standing there. That man you mocked. That man you ignored. He saved lives in this very town. Not with words. Not with comfort. With action. With strength. A murmur spread through the room. Some faces shifted with shame, others with disbelief. The boy looked around, his chest rising with pride. And he fought in wars, he said, his small voice carrying. He wore that jacket for real. My dad said he's a hero. The father placed a hand on his son's shoulder and nodded. A decorated veteran. A man who has given more for this country than any of us sitting here. And how do we thank him? With a dirty glass. The waitress's face paled. The pen slipped from her hand and clattered on the counter. The two men who had laughed before lowered their eyes, suddenly quiet. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the jukebox in the corner. Then an old man in the back, his hands shaking as he leaned on his cane, broke the silence. I remember, he whispered. I was there, during the flood. He pulled me out. My house was gone, and so was I, if not for him. Another voice joined. A woman at the counter said, he brought my brother back that night. I never knew his name. I never thanked him. The truth spread now, not as gossip, but as memory. The whispers of shame grew louder, echoing through the diner. The waitress swallowed hard, her face red. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She grabbed the coffee pot and pretended to busy herself, but everyone saw the guilt in her eyes. The boy's father sat back down slowly, his voice softer now. That man deserves our respect. Not your laughter, not your scorn. You want to know weakness? It's mocking someone stronger than you'll ever be. That's weakness. The room was heavy, the air thick with regret. No one touched their plates. No one dared laugh again. Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the windows. And then, as if fate itself had chosen the moment, the diner door creaked open. The veteran stepped inside. His jacket was the same, worn and patched. His boots still carried dust. His face was calm, unreadable. He looked around the room, and silence fell like a blanket. Every eye was on him now, not with laughter, but with something else, fear, respect, shame, and something deeper they couldn't name. The boy's heart raced. His father leaned forward. The waitress froze where she stood, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. The truth had already echoed through the diner, but the man himself, his presence, his silence, spoke louder than any words. And they all knew, in that moment, that the consequence of yesterday's cruelty was about to begin. The door of the diner closed behind him with a heavy thud, and the sound lingered like a warning bell. The veteran stood just inside, his tall frame outlined by the weak daylight spilling through the glass. His eyes scanned the room slowly, steady as a soldier entering hostile ground. No one laughed this time. No whispers of mockery floated through the air. The diner was silent in a way that made every breath feel loud. The waitress froze behind the counter, the coffee pot still in her hand. Her fingers trembled, drops of dark liquid sliding down the side of the glass. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came. The two men who had mocked him before lowered their heads, staring at the table as if the plates in front of them suddenly mattered more than anything else in the world. The boy sat up straighter, his small hands gripping the edge of his chair. His heart pounded in his chest, his eyes fixed on the veteran like he was staring at a legend come to life. Beside him, his father watched in silence, respect written on his face. The veteran walked forward, his boots thudding against the worn floorboards. He didn't hurry. Every step was deliberate, unshaken, as if the weight of their stares didn't touch him at all. He reached the counter and sat down at the very same stool as yesterday. Slowly, he placed his hands on the counter, rough hands marked by scars and years of labor. The waitress swallowed hard. Her voice was weak when she finally spoke. What can I get you?" The veteran looked at her for a long moment. His gaze wasn't angry, but it wasn't soft either. It was steady in a way that made her shift uncomfortably, as if every careless word she'd spoken had been carved into the air around her. "A glass of water," he said at last. His voice was deep, calm, and carried a weight that silenced even the jukebox in the corner. The waitress nodded quickly, rushing to grab a clean glass this time. She polished it with a rag until her hands shook. She filled it carefully with fresh water, making sure it was clear, spotless. When she placed it in front of him, she didn't meet his eyes. The veteran picked up the glass and studied it. He turned it slightly in his hand, watching the way the light passed through the clean surface. Then, slowly, he set it back down untouched. His eyes moved across the room, scanning every face. "You think respect is earned with noise," he said finally, his voice carrying to every corner of the diner. "With laughter. With gossip. But respect is shown in silence. In how you treat people when no one is watching." No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. "I've been laughed at before," he continued. "I've been spat on. I've been ignored. None of that breaks me. What breaks a town is when its people forget what respect means. When they see someone and choose cruelty instead of kindness." The two men in the corner shifted uncomfortably. One opened his mouth to speak, but the veteran's gaze pinned him in place. "I wore this jacket not for glory," the veteran said, touching the faded patch on his chest. "But because I believed in something bigger than myself. I believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. I bled for that belief. I buried friends for it. And yesterday, when I sat right here, all I asked for was a glass of water." His words cut through the room like a blade. The waitress bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. "You gave me dirt," the veteran said softly, his voice quieter now but even heavier. "Not in the glass, but in the way you looked at me. The way you laughed when you thought I wouldn't speak. That was the dirt." The diner was still. Even the boy held his breath. The veteran leaned back slightly, his shoulders strong, his eyes sharp. "I don't need your pity. I don't even need your thanks. What I want is for you to remember. Remember that respect is not asked for. It is not begged. It is given freely. Or it means nothing." His words hung in the air, heavy and unmoving. The boy couldn't hold back anymore. He stood up from his chair, his voice small but clear. "You're a hero. My dad told me. You saved people when the flood came. You saved this town." The veteran turned his head slowly toward the boy. For the first time, his stern face softened, just a little. He gave a small nod, the kind of nod a soldier gives when words are too heavy to carry. The boy's father stood then, his voice firm. "He's right. This man deserves respect from all of us. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now." The diner erupted, not in noise, but in movement. Heads lowered, eyes dropped, shame filled the room like smoke. The waitress set the coffee pot down with shaking hands. She opened her mouth, but the words cracked. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The veteran looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Words mean little. Actions matter." He slid the clean glass of water back across the counter. "Keep it," he said. "I don't need it anymore." He stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. For a second, it felt as if he might leave again, disappearing back into the streets. But instead, he turned toward the boy. "You've got good eyes, kid," he said quietly. "Eyes that see beyond the noise. Don't ever lose that." The boy nodded quickly, his chest swelling with pride. The veteran adjusted his jacket, looked once more across the room filled with silent, ashamed faces, and then walked toward the door. Every step echoed like thunder in the quiet diner. When he reached the door, he paused. Without turning, he spoke one last time. Respect the living while you still can. Don't wait to honor them when they're gone. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the daylight, leaving the diner heavy with the weight of his words. Inside, no one spoke. No one laughed. The dirty glass was gone, but its shadow would remain forever. The diner was quiet long after the veteran left. His words still clung to the walls like smoke that refused to clear. People shifted in their seats, but no one dared laugh or gossip anymore. Even the jukebox in the corner seemed ashamed to keep playing, its tune fading into silence. The waitress stood frozen behind the counter. Her hands gripped the edge so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, guilt heavy in her throat. For the first time, she understood what she had done, not just serving a dirty glass, but insulting a man who had carried scars for all of them. She looked at the stool where he had sat, the clean glass of water untouched, and her stomach turned. The boy and his father sat quietly at their table, but their silence was different. It wasn't guilt, it was thought. The boy's young mind replayed every word the veteran had spoken. Respect is not asked for. It is shown. Those words had carved themselves into his heart. The owner of the diner, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, came out from the kitchen. He had heard everything from behind the swinging door. He stopped in the middle of the room, his gaze sweeping over his customers. Every single one of you should be ashamed, he said finally. His voice was rough but steady, like gravel dragged across the floor. That man gave more for this country than any of us sitting here ever will. And what did we give him? Laughter. Cruelty. A dirty glass. The waitress tried to speak, but her voice broke. I didn't mean. The owner cut her off. You did mean it. And that's the problem. You saw a man and decided he was beneath you. You forgot to look deeper. You forgot respect. No one argued. Heads hung low. Some stared at their plates. Others closed their eyes, faces red with shame. The boy looked up at his father and whispered, "Will he come back?" The father put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes," he said. "Men like him don't disappear. They return, not for thanks, but to teach. He already has." The owner walked to the counter, picked up the clean glass of water the veteran had refused, and held it up. The sunlight from the window caught it, making the clear surface glow. "This glass," he said, "will stay here. No one touches it. No one moves it. It will remind us of what we did, and of who he is." He placed it back down carefully, as if it were made of gold. The waitress turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. She grabbed her apron and untied it quickly. I can't stay here," she whispered. Without another word, she hurried out the door, leaving her job and her shame behind. The two men who had mocked the veteran earlier stood slowly. One of them cleared his throat, his voice low. "We didn't know," he muttered. "We didn't know who he was." The boy's father looked at them sharply. "That's the point. You didn't want to know. You saw an old man and thought it was easy to laugh. Respect doesn't wait for a name or a story. It's given because every person deserves it." The men lowered their eyes, unable to answer. By evening, word of the veteran's return had spread beyond the diner. People who hadn't been there whispered about what he had said. Some dismissed it, too proud to admit their guilt. But many felt the weight of it in their homes, in their hearts. The next morning, the boy couldn't stop thinking about him. After breakfast, he tugged at his father's sleeve. "Can we find him?" The father hesitated, then nodded. Together, they walked through the streets until they reached the edge of town. The small apartment stood there, its paint peeling, its windows cracked. The boy's father knocked softly. After a moment, the door opened. The veteran stood there, the same jacket on his shoulders, the same calm in his eyes. He looked at them without surprise, as if he had expected this visit. "You came," he said simply. The father nodded. We came to thank you. And to listen, if you'll let us. The veteran studied them for a moment, then stepped aside. Come in. The apartment was small and bare, but neat. A box of medals sat open on the table, along with photographs of young men in uniform. The boy's eyes went wide as he stared at the medals, their golden shine catching the dim light. The veteran noticed his gaze and picked one up, placing it in the boy's small hands. Do you know what this is? The boy shook his head. It's not a prize, the veteran said quietly. It's a memory. Every medal I carry came with a cost. Friends who never came home. Nights that never ended. Fear that never left. People see this shine and think it's glory. But it's not. It's pain. The boy held the medal carefully, his chest tight. Then why did you fight? The veteran's eyes softened. Because sometimes, the right thing is not about what you gain. It's about who you protect. Even if they never thank you. Even if they laugh at you. You still do it. The father's voice was low. That's the lesson, isn't it? Respect is not just words, it's action. The veteran nodded. Respect is kindness when no one's watching. It's dignity in the small things. Even in a glass of water. The boy looked up at him, eyes shining. I'll never forget. The veteran placed the medal back in the box and closed it gently. Good, he said. Then maybe the world will be better when it's yours. For the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. When they left the apartment, the boy clutched his father's hand tightly. His young heart felt heavier, but also stronger. He knew now that the veteran wasn't just a man in an old jacket. He was a lesson carved into flesh and bone. And the town, whether ready or not, was about to learn that same lesson in full. The town was not the same after that day. The diner had once been the center of chatter and laughter, but now it carried a strange silence. People came and went, their voices lower, their faces more thoughtful. The glass of clean water still sat on the counter, untouched, glowing in the sunlight like a reminder carved in glass. The waitress never returned. Some said she left town out of shame. Others whispered she couldn't bear to see the stool where the veteran had sat. But her absence only deepened the lesson, her choice was its own punishment. The two men who had mocked the veteran no longer laughed so freely. They kept their voices down in public, careful with their words. Yet guilt clung to them like shadows. No matter how much they tried to act normal, people remembered. Every time they walked into the diner, eyes followed them. They were a reminder that cruelty does not vanish, it leaves marks. But the biggest change came in the boy. He carried the veteran's words inside him like a flame. His school friends noticed it first, he no longer joined in when others teased weaker kids. Instead, he stopped the teasing. Respect, he told them. Everyone deserves it. The kids didn't always understand, but they listened. Because when he spoke, there was strength in his voice, strength that had come from a man who had lived through war. 1 week later, the town held a community gathering at the park. It was supposed to be about summer plans and local news, but the air was heavy with something else. People whispered about the veteran. Some said they wanted to make things right. Others wondered if it was too late. When the veteran arrived, no one expected it. He walked slowly into the park, his worn jacket on his shoulders, his cane tapping against the ground. The crowd fell into silence. For once, there was no laughter, no mocking, no indifference. Just silence and waiting. The town's mayor stepped forward nervously. He cleared his throat, his voice shaky. Sir, he said, we want to apologize. We treated you with disrespect. You deserved better. The veteran looked at the mayor for a long moment. Then his eyes swept over the crowd. He saw faces ashamed, uncertain, hopeful. He shook his head slowly. I don't want your apology, he said, his voice steady, carrying across the park. Apologies are words. Words don't wash the dirt off a glass. Actions do. The crowd shifted, uneasy. The boy's father stepped forward then, his son's small hand gripping his. "Tell us, then," he said. "What action will show you respect? What can we do?" The veteran was quiet for a while. Then he spoke. "You want to respect me? Respect each other. Respect the stranger who walks into your diner, the child who cannot defend himself, the worker who sweats for his bread. Stop waiting until someone is gone to honor them. Show them dignity while they are here. That is respect." His words settled over the crowd like a weight. For a moment, no one moved. Then the boy stepped forward, his voice small but clear. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll remember. I'll show respect. Even when no one else does." The veteran looked down at him, and something in his heart expression softened. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice lower now. "Then maybe there's hope yet." From that day on, things began to shift. It was slow, but it was real. The diner owner changed the way he ran his business. Every customer was served with kindness, no matter who they were. The dirty glass never disappeared, it stayed on a shelf behind the counter, a warning and a reminder. The men who mocked the veteran found themselves working harder to regain the trust of others. Some forgave them, some didn't. But they carried their shame like a scar, knowing one careless act could never be undone. The boy, however, grew stronger. The lesson he had learned burned inside him, guiding him through school, through friendships, through life. He carried the story of the veteran wherever he went, retelling it not as gossip but as truth. "Respect is action," he would say. And action matters more than words. Years later, when the veteran passed away quietly in his sleep, the whole town gathered. The same people who once mocked him now stood shoulder to shoulder in silence. The diner closed its doors for the day. Flags were lowered. The boy, now a young man, carried the veteran's medal in his hand as he walked with the funeral procession. At the cemetery, the mayor gave a speech, but it was short. The real silence, the real respect, came from the people who stood still with bowed heads. No one laughed. No one mocked. The dirty glass had taught them all. After the service, the young man placed the medal on the grave and whispered, "I didn't forget. I never will." And in that moment, the lesson became more than just the veterans. It became the town's. The consequence of a dirty glass had been shame, change, and memory. And though the veteran was gone, his lesson lived on, in every act of kindness, in every glass of clean water, in every small moment of respect. Because sometimes the smallest insult carries the greatest consequence. And sometimes the smallest act of respect can change a whole town.